Well, hello and welcome along to one of the more unique championship prediction shows we'll do this season. It is officially Matchday 29 and 7 of the 12 fixtures have survived over FA Cup 4th round weekend. But to make them survive, a few of them have been moved, and these fixtures are spread out over an 8-day period between Wednesday the 24th of January and transfer deadline day, Wednesday the 31st. So we're going to run through all 7 games that have officially survived from Matchday 29, and we are going to give you our preview, our score predictions, and the reason why. And as always, I'll encourage you to do exactly the same. If you beat or match my score, you will get a shout out in the next recap, which will be next week on Thursday as we look ahead to another full weekend in a championship. So hopefully you're looking forward to that, at which point I would imagine there will be plenty of additions to some of the squads in this division. A quick caveat before we start though to say for the games next Tuesday and Wednesday, of course, I can't take any FA Cup fixtures into account, and I didn't just want to bore you with 2 or 3 little 2-game episodes, so I felt this was the best way to do it. So before we go and look ahead to Matchday 29, or what's left of it, let's move back and have a quick recap of Matchday 28. Where of course we had a full weekend in a championship, and actually it went the way I said it couldn't. I said we were either going to get a 3 or 4 point week or a massive one with 14 or 15, and we didn't. It was right in the middle. I managed 9 points in the end, in part thanks to 2 perfect scores, and it was the same across the board for all of us. Perfect scores were definitely the big points winner this weekend. I got Plymouth Argyle's 3-1 win against Cardiff and Coventry's 2-1 win at Sheffield Wednesday. A couple of other close calls for a point or 3, and a few shock scorelines that got all of us. However, my other 3 points were for the wins for Leeds and Southampton, and of course for Blackburn's draw against Huddersfield. But if you went for the Championship's favourite scoreline this weekend, you will have been in luck, because there were 4 of them overall. Let's have a look at how you guys got on in the comments though, because despite my worries about this weekend, actually only 2 of you beat my score, and only just. 1 of you matched it as well. It was a very even match day overall, with everyone between 5 and 10 points. But, Steve, you managed to match my score with 9, so well done to you. 2 perfect scores, 3 correct outcomes as well. And then an extra outcome for both Daniel and for Mitchell, who got 10 points each with 2 perfect scores. A fabulous effort given some of the surprise results. But that was match day 28. Can you back it up over these strange 7 games? Well, let's find out. We're going to start with the game this Wednesday night, the 24th of January. It is Leeds United at home to Norwich City at Ellen Road. Both of these sides in pretty good form now. Norwich 5 unbeaten in all competitions and back-to-back wins in the Championship. They beat West Brom 2-0. And I tell you what, Josh Sargent is back, so is the goal threat. Jonathan Rose looking brilliant as well. Suddenly all the talk of Wagner out is disappearing as we speak. I did find this game quite interesting though, because I was actually keeping up with Saturday's fixtures at first via final score. And Chris Sutton was talking about it as if Norwich were getting pasted. They were talking about West Brom's dominance of the game. And I think we need to separate dominance of possession with dominance of a football match. Because yes, West Brom had the possession, they had more of the territory. But Norwich always looked a big threat on the counter-attack watching the highlights. They probably could have had a third as well. Not denying West Brom had a couple of chances, but for me, Norwich always looked the more likely and in the end just about deserved their victory. A clean sheet is absolutely precious for them as well. It's a big end to the January window coming up too, but with key players returning in defence and attack and a strong bench to call upon again, I'm fancying Norwich for the playoffs still. They've got a great chance of being up there. They're just 2 points off it. But they travel to a Leeds side who, of course, managed to get that late win against Preston. It was a really frustrating game for them. The one thing you don't want to do against Preston is go behind, because you know what's going to happen. So to do so in the second minute must have been infuriating. Such a poor goal to concede to. But Dan James got them back on terms immediately. They got sucked into Preston's game a bit, and similar to what happened in the reverse fixture where Matchday was sent off, they were dragged into a few battles, a few little scuffles, just running down the clock, which is exactly what Preston wanted. But in the end, a late penalty for Joel Pirro, cool as a cucumber under pressure, and Leeds got the big win, which, given the fact both Ipswich and Leicester drew, could yet be a vital one. So 4 straight wins for them, 3 in the Championship. They look good defensively as well. I've got a feeling this game's going to be a thriller. Both sides have got great attacks, and if Norwich score first, we are going to see one of those sort of brilliant games where Leeds have to chase it. I do think Leeds are slightly too strong going forward for Norwich's defence. But I think this is going to be a good game at both ends. I don't know what's telling me it because both sides have had great defensive records recently and neither have conceded more than one in the last 5 games. But I'm going to go for a barnstormer and Leeds to win it by 3-2. Let's move on to Saturday afternoon, where there are just 2 of the scheduled fixtures at 3 p.m. The first of them is the side that Leeds beat, Preston North End, who travel to Millwall. Millwall were beaten comfortably at QPR. It was a very disappointing day for them. And you know what? To go to QPR, who have been, I think you would say, poor defensively, and particularly from set pieces, where Millwall have been so strong traditionally in the last few years, with a lot of the squad that's still there, to manage 1 shot on target and 2 shots all game. It's not good enough. And yes, we mentioned it with the other games as well, with Norwich, West Brom. You can dominate the ball, you can have more of it, but you've got to go somewhere with it. You've got to move it more quickly. And Millwall, they didn't utilise it well. They didn't create chances, they didn't get wide, and they didn't get set pieces. And that is a lack of diligence on the game plan, because it's very clear that's QPR's weakness. So a hugely disappointing day for them, and there is a risk they could be one of those sucked into a relegation battle, albeit I feel they've got enough. But this game becomes huge because Preston, despite that win against Bristol City, continue their overall poor form for the last 20 games. They are still in a decent position in the table, but Millwall can go within 3 points of them with a win. They tried their best against Leeds after that early goal. They did have a threat on the counter-attack in fairness, but defensively, they were trying to run down the clock towards the end, and it was inevitable that you were going to give up one chance. To give away the penalty, to have so many players so deep. Of course, they were trying to get Leeds involved in the dirty tactics, get a red card, get a few scuffles, whatever. But it didn't pay off. The benefit, of course, is that they scored again. Will Keane is the man for the moment. But this game, I have no idea what to predict. The safe betting is probably a 0-0 or a Championship's favourite scoreline. But I just feel it's so big for both teams that Millwall have to push in the end. It's the sort of game they'll see as winnable, and it means they're either going to win or lose it by 1-0. I'm going to go for a win. I'm going to go Millwall to nick it 1-0. Yes, they've conceded 8 in the last 3, but they're against good opposition or away from home. Preston have not got a huge goal threat, and bar Will Keane have not scored in the last 5 games. So I'm going to go for Millwall to nick it 1-0 at the Den. Let's move on to the other game on Saturday, and it is under pressure Mick Beale already against Stephen Schumacher's Stoke. Stoke lost their first game under their new manager after a fair few unbeaten, a 2-1 defeat at home to Tony Mowbray and Birmingham. How ironic given the fact they're playing Sunderland. And to be fair, Stoke had a lot of that game. They dominated the ball, they dominated the shot count, but in the end, it was just one of those days. They had 3 or 4 very good opportunities, and yes, towards the end, they did resort at times to shooting from distance and whatever. But on another day, Stoke could have won that 2 or 3-0. Tony Mowbray sides will always have a threat on the counter. They didn't deal with it brilliantly defensively, and they didn't make the most of their set pieces. I think their corner count was 13 by the end, and while they had 1 or 2 chances from them, again, it's just finding a way to take advantage. But a very encouraging performance, I would say, in the second half in particular. And against the Sunderland side that have lost 3 in a row, 2 in a row at home, including the derby in the Cup. A pretty gutless performance at home to Hull, where again, I talk about the fact that aside, yes, you can have the ball, yes, you can have shots from distance, but what are you really doing? Are you carving a team open? And it was the usual spiel from Mick Beale. We had more shots, we had more of the game, we had more of the ball. Yeah, but you can't just shoot from 25 yards and hope one goes in every week. You've got to have a pattern of play that has some cutting edge, and we're seeing a familiar pattern there. The locals are getting frustrated, and from the excitement of Tony Mowbray's team on the counter, it's starting to feel like a far cry, which is why we thought it wouldn't be a great fit. So this game's a really interesting one for me. For Stoke, it's an important one for performance. For Sunderland, it is now about getting a result. And I think I'm going to sit on the fence with it because Stoke played really well despite the defeat in the second half. And if they play like that again and create that many openings, they will score more goals. Sunderland have got to have more of an attacking threat. They've still got individual magic in the team. I'm going to go for the Championship's favourite scoreline. I think Stoke are maybe the more likely. I'm going to go for 1 apiece, which, to be fair, Stoke have drawn a few games under Schumacher. Let's move on to the TV game on Sunday. It is QPR versus Huddersfield Town. Queen's Park Rangers with a big win against Millwall, and a very deserved one as well. Gave up a bit of possession, did Marty Cifuentes' side, but used the ball well on the counter, had a real threat against Millwall, and most importantly, suffocated them, gave them next to no chances themselves. It was a really good defensive display, which has been a long time in coming for QPR. Huddersfield, a 1-1 draw at Blackburn. Disappointing result, but after conceding early, to get back on terms was important. And while they didn't have a lot of the ball, they didn't have more of the chances in the game. They created 2 or 3 great openings on the counter. And probably, going by the key chances shown on the highlights and the opta clear-cut stats, probably should have nicked it, to be honest. It was a decent away performance and it was an important point given QPR's win. But they've got to start winning games as well, because it's becoming a case of 3 from 4 down there, with a bit of a gap between Huddersfield and Birmingham. This game absolutely huge at the bottom. If QPR win it, they will replace Huddersfield outside the relegation zone. And for that reason, I'm going to go for Huddersfield to win it. And I know this is a bizarre pick. They've not won since the Blackburn home game on Boxing Day. But QPR, they do concede goals. From set pieces, they are pretty poor defensively. They've conceded a lot of goals under Cifuentes that way. And Sorba Thomas, on his day, has got one of the best set-piece deliveries in the league. Yes, they're missing a couple of their players that may be more of a threat from set-pieces. I'm thinking of a Matty Pearson, for example. But with Hellick, with Tom Lees, they've got players who can get on the end of it. And for me, I'm going to go for Huddersfield to win it on a set-piece. And I'm going to go by 2-1, because we've not seen back-to-back wins often from QPR. And last time they got close, they went on a poor run. So, despite the fact I'll be in the minority here, I'm going 2-1 to Huddersfield Town. Let's move on to the following midweek. We've got 3 games left to go. 2 of them featuring in-form sides at home on Tuesday night. The first of which is 6th place Coventry City against Bristol City. Let's start with the visitors, who got a 1-1 draw at home to Watford. Scott Twine making an instant impact on his debut. Was a decent performance from Bristol City, but neither side created bundles of great openings in that game. A few decent efforts and set pieces from each side, and Bristol City just edged the number of shots on goal. But overall, a draw you could argue was a fair result. And for Bristol City, it's not been a bad week, let's be fair. To get through in the cup, to play Watford at home and get a point, not a bad one. But we of course don't know what will happen in their cup tie at the weekend. For Coventry, another good win. The unbeaten run continues and Mark Robbins is doing brilliantly. They won 2-1 at Sheffield Wednesday. Ben Sheaf popping up with a quality goal for the first, bundled one in for the second. Of course, it was a shame that Ben Sheaf didn't really get talked about because the game was overshadowed by a couple of morons in the crowd. Hopefully they get dealt with appropriately. But overall, Coventry really happy with the result, playing well at the moment and just look full of confidence. So brilliant to see them up in the playoffs again. And in this one, I just don't know. There's part of me that feels they'll get frustrated here because we've seen Bristol City do it a few times to teams. When they're on a roll, they just frustrate them into a draw or a 1-0 defeat. And you know what? Despite everything the form book's telling us, I'm going to go for this game to be a Championship's favourite scoreline. It dominated the headlines last weekend with 4 across the division, and including some games you wouldn't expect. I've just got a feeling this might be one of them. I'm going to go for 1 goal apiece, but Coventry the more likely, of course, on paper. Let's move on to the leaders, Leicester City, who host Swansea City on Tuesday night. Leicester frustrated late on by Ipswich, but to be honest, they were clinging on for a lot of the second half. Comfortable in the first, had a couple of chances, but they really struggled with Ipswich's press in a second, and in the end, the draw was probably a fair result, but not a disaster for Leicester by any means, and important they didn't lose after that defeat at Coventry. For Swansea, beaten comfortably by Southampton. The first half, they were poor defensively, gave away silly goals. But second half, you've got to say, Southampton took a few liberties and they should have taken advantage. They had 3 or 4 great opportunities to get a goal back. One glaring miss in particular and a great save from Bazunu too. But Swansea on the counter and pressing Southampton looked good. But they've got to clear up defensively. Very similar to what we used to say when they were managed by Russell Martin. But not the worst start from Luke Williams performance-wise. We mentioned his horrible run of games when he took over though, and away at Leicester, even playing well. You've got to imagine this might be a bit too much. Leicester need a win after 2 without. They've generally bounced back most of the time this season. Of course, there's a cup tie this weekend for both of them in between, but I don't think that will affect the result here. I'm going to go for Leicester City to win and to strengthen their position at the top of the table with a 3-1 victory against Swansea. And the final game on Wednesday night is Sheffield Wednesday versus Watford. Both sides again will be in cup action at the weekend first, but Sheffield Wednesday come off back-to-back defeats in the Championship a better defensive display after the 4-0 against Southampton, a 2-1 defeat against Coventry for them. And just again, as these sides start to get close, we saw it with QPR a few weeks ago, we've seen it with Sheffield Wednesday now, just cannot get over that line of getting out of the relegation zone. A crucial end to January incoming, maybe 1 or 2 additions needed still. But overall for Sheffield Wednesday, they've got themselves back in the hunt. And if they can get a result here, it could be absolutely crucial. I feel it's a pivotal game for them, but they're against a Watford side who haven't lost in their last 4 championship games, albeit 3 of those were draws, and albeit they've not kept a clean sheet. It was a 1-1 draw at Bristol City for them. A decent point on the road, you've got to say. It keeps them in that mix, just 3 points off the playoffs. But it has been Watford's Achilles heel this season. 10 draws, the second most in the Championship after Huddersfield. And if they can just turn a few of those into victories, they're actually fairly good at avoiding defeat. So you feel with that correction, Watford could push on into the playoffs. But for now, I'm going to go for Sheffield Wednesday, I think, to nick this one. I'm going on the basis of the QPR Huddersfield one. It's so important that Sheffield Wednesday get a result that Danny Rowe will hope they'll deliver on this occasion. We've seen a couple of big home wins recently. Cardiff in the Cup, Hull in the league where they played really well. And under the lights at Hillsborough, I can see it being a big atmosphere. And as a result, I'm going to go for Sheffield Wednesday to nick this game by 2-1 against Watford. So with that out of the way, let's have a quick recap of what I've gone for in Matchday 29. 7 fixtures across 8 days, and 2 teams are going to score 3 in my opinion. Leeds this Wednesday against Norwich, where I've gone for a barnstormer against the defensive form book. I've gone for Leicester to win by 3-1 to stay top of the table comfortably. And I've also gone for a couple of big results at the bottom. Huddersfield to deny QPR a chance at leaving the relegation zone with a 2-1 win at Loftus Road. And Sheffield Wednesday to get 3 points closer with a big win against Watford next Wednesday night. But those are just my predictions for Matchday 29. Do you agree or disagree? Let me know in the comments below and give me your predictions for these 7 fixtures. Of course, if you missed the first one, don't worry, you can play along with the other 6. There's a good chance you'll still beat my score. A reminder, if you do beat or match it, you'll get a shout out in the next recap, which will be next Thursday afternoon as we look ahead to Matchday 30. For now though, if you did enjoy this one, please do put a thumbs up on it. We've got loads coming up the rest of this week. I'm at 3 live matches, which you'll see a few clips from on the channel. We're also back later this weekend with a Premier League preview, looking ahead to a full midweek fixture list and Luton v Brighton on Tuesday night. There's also more championship predictions next Thursday as well, and I'm sure we'll be talking transfers a bit when that one comes around. If you want to stay up to date and make sure you don't miss any of it, then subscribe and turn that notification bell on. Thank you very much for watching and being here as always, and I'll see you next time for Matchday 30.